22 minutes after the hour, and just when it seemed like VeonBell was potentially going to sit out the whole season, or at a minimum, show up the Tuesday after Week 10, the latest he could, Jeremy Fowler of ESPN reports that Bell will show up in Week 7. That's the Steelers' bye week. Sign the franchise tender, and Bell plans to stay with the Steelers after that. Bell later told Fowler, "It sucks having to sit out football. I want to play. I want to win games and the playoffs, but I've got to take this stand. Knowing my worth and knowing I can tear a ligament or get surgery at any time, I knew I couldn't play 16 games with 400 or more touches." Now, Peter, we saw on Sunday what can happen with one play. You can break your leg if you're Earl Thomas. He's still coming back, Bell is, and accepting the risk that he will suffer the kind of injury that will keep him from getting the kind of payday that he wants. So, I don't know. Is this Bell making a calculated decision that I'm going to miss half the season and just roll the dice on the second half? Or did he just get to the point where he decides, I can't stay away anymore, I want to be back? It sounds like he's mainly decided, I just want to be back and play football.
Mike, this is a calculated risk. He's basically saying, I'm going to get paid for a little more than half the season, and I'm going to play for a little more than half the season. Remember, the NFL distributes paychecks in 17-part increments, not 16. So theoretically, and I wonder if the Steelers would grieve this, if he signs his tender on the Monday of the bye week, theoretically, I would think, and I don't know exactly what the rules are, but I would think he's going to get paid in that bye week, basically whatever it is, $853,000. That's a pretty expensive check, for the Steelers to write when the team is not playing, and I don't even think the team will be practicing that week. So that's one part of it. The other part I find really interesting is that right now, James Conner has taken his place, has 81 touches through 4 games. So that means basically that the Steelers are giving the Le'Veon Bell character in their little mini-series 20 touches a game. That adds up to about 325 a year in general, okay? And I'm not saying that this is exact, right? But the only point that I'm making is that you never know. Like Le'Veon Bell says, I don't want to come back for 400 touches. First of all, I don't think there's any way with a healthy James Conner that if Le'Veon Bell was there for 16 games, fully healthy, that he would have ever had 400 touches. I don't see the Steelers doing that. I see it being 290 to 150, something like that. It's an absolute guess. But the second thing is, Mike, have you looked at the Steelers' schedule? The first 2 games out of the bye, Cleveland and at Baltimore. So Le'Veon Bell comes back. All of a sudden, it's no longer a gimme game against the Browns. He comes back to play the Browns, and then they go to the Ravens in what I think is going to be an absolute total must-win game for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Here's another issue to keep in mind, and this came up back in early September when he didn't show up before the final roster cuts. By rule after that, if he decides to sign his franchise tender, he and the Steelers must decide in advance what he will be paid if the Steelers put him on roster-exempt status, which they can do for 2 regular season games. I don't know whether or not they're going to insist on doing that when he shows up in Week 7. But if they have the ability to put him on roster-exempt status for 2 games and they're in a bye week in Week 7 and they have to agree what he's going to be paid while he's on roster-exempt status while they're getting him in shape, that could get very interesting. He may have every intention to show up that week, and then he shows up and Kevin Colbert says to him, okay, we got to figure out what we're going to pay you while you're on roster exempt. We're putting you on a 2-week roster exemption. And he's like, what are you talking about? Well, we're not going to pay $855,000 a week if we're going to exercise our right to put you on roster exempt status. So we have to figure out how much we're going to pay you. That's the side of this we don't know yet, Peter, because we don't know whether or not the Steelers are going to roll out the red carpet. They've been trying to trade him. So how are they going to react to this? That remains to be seen, but it could still get a little messy when he shows up.
I expect it to be messy. There's no way this is going to be clean. I don't think it's going to be an Earl Thomas Seahawks type of messy, but I do think there's a good chance it'll be messy. And Mike, I just keep saying the Steelers at that point are going to be in must-win mode. And I think Mike Tomlin's attitude is going to be, we'll let bygones be bygones. We got to beat the Browns and the Ravens.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.